All right. Well, thanks, Scott. And it's good to see some people here. I'm excited to be doing this again. This webinar today, it's going to be kind of in the same vein as last time. A lot of this is information that I think is good to have in your back pocket. There is some direct application. And we could go, we could go into a lot of depth with this. We're just going to cover this on the surface today, because I think I think the recognition of this dynamic and what it is, what it does to our relationships is important enough. So we're going to talk about ambivalence today. Those of you who have seen my work with Mother Enmeshed Men and those videos, you've probably seen me talk about ambivalence before. Ambivalence is when we feel two ways about something, at least two ways about something. And I would add to that, it's accompanied with the feeling that it would be impossible for me to make up my mind about what to do because I feel two ways about this. There's nothing wrong with feeling both ways. There's nothing wrong with not knowing what you want to do. But we're going to look today at the impact on relationships of ambivalence. And I see this all the time in the individuals and the couples that I work with. And what I've seen emerge is, instead of ambivalence just being a valid place to be coming from for a while, it becomes a place to hide. Well, I don't really know what I feel, or I don't really know what to do. And after a while, it has a corrosive impact on our relationships. Generally, ambivalence is driven by something deeper. Think about other big decisions you've made where there has not been ambivalence. In the beginning, you may not have known, what you were going to choose. But as you got more information, as things became clearer, eventually, you could make a choice and you could head in a direction. So ambivalence is usually tied to something deeper, like guilt, split loyalty, grief, unincorporated anger. So ambivalence becomes a way to keep things at bay that we don't want to deal with or that feel bad. So in my work with enmeshed men, ambivalence is a way to keep their guilt at bay. Because making a decision to, show up and do this for mom really hurts spouse, or to make a decision to be loyal to my spouse really hurts mom. So ambivalence is a way to camp out and feel like the illusion is I'm making everybody happy. I don't have to face the guilt. I don't have to face the loss. So ultimately, ambivalence becomes a delay of loss. It's one of those, as we talk about in 12-step rooms, it's one of those playing God in our own life, determining what losses we will and won't face. The truth about life is, with every change comes loss. We face that since we were babies. And we'll continue to face that throughout life. That is one of those immovable facts of life, is every time something changes, there is loss that comes with it. It just so happens that some of the losses we get really, really excited about. I changed jobs and I no longer work for that awful boss. I'm fine with that loss. But the loss of I'm a grown up now, and mom and dad aren't there to catch me when I fall. There's a loss there, and that may not be one that we're so excited about. But loss is a part of change. We can't get around it. So what I would say when it comes to ambivalence in relationships, recognize the trade-off you're trying to make. I'm trying to stay away from the loss, and the way that I'm doing that is not to allow myself to make up my mind or to just pick a direction and see how it goes. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that hurts things. A little more on the delay of loss, especially in North American culture, I would say. No, that's too broad. American culture, the United States culture, we tend to not take loss very well. We're surrounded by a wellness industry that makes billions of dollars every year that's all about keeping you youthful and fit. Well, the truth is, your body starts decaying after a certain point. You're no longer building up, you're ramping down. And you can't change that. You can't delay death, yet we have an industry around the delay of death, the delay of loss. some of that loss and that grieving may look like, this isn't the marriage that I thought it was. It may look like, I'm not the person that I thought it was. The world doesn't work the way that I expected that it did or should. We all get confronted with that stuff throughout life. And I would argue that the relationally healthy thing to do is to take the loss and roll with it, find what comes next. Okay, we don't have the relationship we thought we had. Do we still want a relationship? Do I want to get to know you as the person I'm understanding you are now? Do I want to, yes, I'm not the, my actions would say I'm not the person that I said I was all along. Am I still interested in being a good person? Am I interested in moving forward? Or am I going to continue to be devastated by the fact that this isn't what I thought it should be? So delaying the loss is about ignoring new facts and clinging to the old way. That becomes problematic because the force of life is always pushing us to renewal, change. So we become not a rock in the riverbed. Rocks are solid and made for water to run over. We become a human in the river who's trying to hold back the tide. There's a lot of energy that goes into that. Well, if your energy goes into denying the reality, guess what? You don't have to turn to your relationship and keep up with. You don't have energy for your partner. You don't have energy for your interests. You don't have energy for making your life a good place to be. So ambivalence carries this allure, this promise, I would say this siren song of it's an acceptable way to deal with the loss, except that it doesn't really deal with the loss. I'll just camp out here until ultimately the decision is made for me. But that carries a set of problems as well, because usually when a decision is made for us, we'll resent it. Even if it's a decision that we would have made. Having the power of choice taken out of our hands makes victims out of us. And that, that which what does Anne Lamott say? That which we resist persists. I would say that which we resist and delay magnifies as well. So the loss that we'll face down the road will compound when we don't make choices that do come with risk, but they also come with forward momentum. So ultimately, what ambivalence does to relationships is it puts two sets of rules in play. There's the rules of reality, which are the only place where you can meet your partner. You can't meet your partner on the field of fantasy unless it's a fantasy you two co-construct, where it doesn't really matter what's going on in the outside world. But ultimately, where I see couples, they have to start meeting is on the field of reality. I was working with a couple earlier this week, and they were frustrated with how stuck they feel. And as I got them talking about feelings, one of the things that came up for one of the partners, that it was a truthful thing to say, although painful, was, I don't know how close I want to be to you. And that came with a bunch of tears. And this individual took a deep breath, and I said, what are you noticing? And they said, that was awful. And I feel some relief. I feel like I've been trying to avoid that. And the partner, said something like, that was kind of a kick to the gut. But I've been suspecting that for a while. Again, when they choose to meet on the plane of reality, there's actually things that can be done. There's a path forward. So when we live in ambivalence, there's these two sets of rules. I will stay in the reality that I want. I'm not going to make a choice. I'm not going to make a movement. I'm not going to claim what I want, declare what I want. When you're in a relationship with somebody who operates on a different set of rules than apply to you, that's automatically unsafe, and it cannot be safe if the two of you operate on different rules. I mean, you could say addiction is a form of ambivalence. Pain is coming, I'm going to medicate it away. Well, that's nice for you. You get to medicate your pain away, all the while I'm here dealing with the reality of our life. See, it's not safe. When you don't ultimately know what your partner wants, you cannot contextualize their behavior. So if your partner says something to you like, post-discovery, there's nothing more that I want in this world for this marriage to work. and I'm going to do everything that I can to make this marriage work. I'm going to do everything I can to earn back your trust. And then your partner, needs to go to 3 meetings a week in order to get their head on straight with recovery, with sobriety. If you don't know what your partner's intention is, and all of a sudden they're gone 3 nights a week and they don't have time for you, you don't know what sense to make of that. Gosh, this big bad thing just happened and now you're pulling away from me. You want less time with me, not more. What's going on? When you know what your partner has chosen, you have a context for that behavior. Yeah, this sucks that we don't get the time together that I would like, but this is to support the ultimate desires. I want to be with you and I want to be safe for you. So when we don't make a declaration, when we don't make a choice, we're depriving our partner of context. We're depriving them of the ability to see our behavior in a larger context and either understand, yes, we're working towards that, or give feedback. Hey, you said you want this relationship, but you continue to do this thing that hurts me. Not going to work. It gives you pull with each other. It gives you voice with each other when there's not ambivalence. So let's talk maybe a couple examples of what ambivalence looks like on the addiction side and on the betrayed side. And then just a couple words on why I would advocate for making movement. So a lot of ambivalence I see for addicts, especially after the relationship. Do I still want this relationship? Well, yes, if it's not this way, this way, this way. Versus that's ambivalence, because that's actually not a declaration. Would I want a job that pays me $5 million a year? Sure, if I didn't have to work any harder than I do now. If it was something that I love doing. If it was something like, it creates fantasy. There's not a reality there. So do I want this? Yes, if, versus that's ambivalence. It's not helpful. Instead saying, I want to give this relationship every chance that I can, so that we can both determine if this is the place that is best for us. I'm on board. That's not ambivalent. That's, here's what I'm going to do until there is different information. But given where it stands right now, I'm doing everything that I can to support the continuance of this relationship and to support you as my partner. Another form of ambivalence I see, well, we'll see if I can find some helpful things that help me in recovery. I'll kind of look around. Versus, I will do everything necessary. I will do whatever it takes to make my recovery work. All the research that's been done about, the effectiveness of 12 steps of therapy, all of that, the main result is, or I should say a couple of the main results. Some of it show that it's really efficacious, that it does help. Other things show it's not much more helpful than the control group. The thing that I think makes the difference is your commitment to it. If I need this to work, I'll make it work. If I'm dabbling around, I'll find things that annoy me that aren't going to work, and I'll justify myself out. You see no safety there. If recovery is an imperative for you, you addicts that are listening, if recovery is an imperative for you, don't be ambivalent about it. Claim it. I have to find something that works. I won't stop until I find what works for me. For partners, and no, I'll tread here with sensitivity, because your world has been turned upside down through the disclosure of betrayal. And there is a time for grieving and mourning and being confused. What I see for a lot of partners, however, because there is a lot of scariness, there's a lot of fear that comes with making a declaration saying this is the direction that I'm headed in. There's a lot of fear in getting it wrong and getting your heart broken again. I've seen my share of partners stay in that, and I don't know what I want. I don't know if I'm staying or going. I don't know if I can trust this person. And they stay there for such a long time that it corrodes. It eats their soul. It's not helpful. So some forms I see, I don't know if I can trust you. Perfectly fine statement. And for a time in recovery, I think that's one of the truest things that can be said. I don't know if I can trust you. There is some ambivalence there, though, especially if that goes on for a really, really long time. Versus the declarative statement, do the following. Here's what I need to see from you. If I can see this from you, I will consider giving you my trust again. You see, there's a direction picked. I would like to go in the direction of trusting you. In order to do that, I need to see X, Y, Z. Are you game? Yes or no? Like I said earlier, when we stay in ambivalence, we entrench a victim stance. We're not responsive. We don't give ourselves options for response. That's an option for response when trust is broken. You really messed up. Here's what it's going to take for me to consider giving you my trust again. Are you game or not? That's claiming the power it's an awful power, an awful responsibility, but it's necessary as a betrayed partner that you exercise your ability to choose and set the terms for the relationship. And I've talked about that in previous videos. There's so much good and there's so much bad in my partner. I don't know. Versus I know the good and I know the bad and I know the impact on me because I've done my work on that. Simply looking at your relationship as a balance of good or bad, that's grade school stuff. And I don't mean to be denigrating there, but that's not, again, that's not claiming your personal responsibility and your personal ability in your relationships. Yes, relationships are good or bad. People are a mixed bag. Everybody is. It's our jobs as responsible, living, breathing adults, functional adults, to know what the good and bad impact means for us. Instead of closing our eyes and hoping that the scales balance in a direction that's not hard for us. Well, let me do the work. Let me dive in. I may find that, yes, there's a volume of good things, but the bad things that happen, the bad things that you allow are absolutely toxic for me. I have a decision to make there. So here's why I would advocate for, as early as you can in recovery, start challenging the ambivalence. I watch a lot of nature shows at my house because my kids find animals fascinating, and I still do too. We were on a vacation in the Florida Keys last week, and the backyard of our hotel was the beach. And in the morning, you could go out to the shallows, and stingrays would come in and crabs. And my son and I, one morning, we spent about an hour running up and down the dock that was there. We felt like 5-year-old kids. Whoa, look at this! Did you see that? I love that discovery. So we were watching a documentary the other day on owls, and when owls are hunting, they'll do the head movements like this. They'll move around to a lot of different angles. What that does is it creates acuity. It creates sharpness in vision, because when you move your perceiving organ back and forth, you get an idea, you get a better idea of distance than when you have a static image. You get a better idea of depth than when you have a static image. So moving out of ambivalence isn't about knowing what's right. It's about committing to a direction and seeing what happens. Now, let me move in this direction a little bit and see what happens. If I say to my partner, again, you've really messed up. Here's the things that I need you to do in order for me to consider giving you trust. You've just moved to a different vantage point, and then you watch. Well, what does my partner do with this? Sometimes we see things that are promising and we make another movement and we get in closer. Sometimes we see things that concern us and we have to pull back. Either way, when you make a declaration, when you pick a direction, when you choose to challenge the ambivalence, you get better information. You get a more accurate viewpoint of what's going on, and you can always take it step by step. Challenging your ambivalence is not the same thing. If you say, I want to move out of this, I don't know to stay or go place, it doesn't mean that you're saying I'm all in and nothing could ever change that. It's I would consider being in, or I'll consider being in. I need to see the following. You also, I think it helps us embrace that. That adult part, that adult recognition that all change comes with loss and there's no way around it. For the couples that I've worked with who have healed and done great, one of the first things that they recognize is our old relationship is over. Let's quit hashing out the old relationship and seeing if we recognize it. Let's let it's done. We're creating something new. That's a choice. That's not ambivalence. Ambivalence is I really wish it was like when. The bottom line, when we challenge our ambivalence, we're inviting movement into our lives to help us see more clearly, and to actually make better choices. So one of the parting messages I would like to leave is to think about the impact of ambivalence. I think the allure of it, the siren song of it is, this is the safest place to be. If you're in a one-person system, maybe it's kind of safe to be there, at least it's comfortable. But there is an impact on your partner for ambivalence. Even in the professional world, in your job, if you're never quite committed, if people don't know what your intention is with your work long term, you'll probably be passed over for promotion. You probably won't be given opportunities to grow because people don't know what you intend. So think about the cost that your ambivalence has. Let yourself feel that. Challenge that part of you that gets comfortable there, because that comfort is going to turn into atrophy later on, and it will hurt worse. So that's ambivalence.
Thank you, Jon. Type your questions into the Q&A feature. We'll take as many as we can. Jon, when you use the word stuck, and that just, the theme of the week for me has been stuck. Not for me personally, but for the guys that I work with in my drop-in group and some of my work groups. They're just stuck, and it's an ambivalence. They're the addicts, and they're ambivalent. On the one hand, their addiction is their coping mechanism, and it brings them some relief and maybe still some pleasure, although usually they're just, by the time they get to me, they're not feeling pleasure anymore. It's just about relief from emotional discomfort. And it's their only coping mechanism because their world has gotten very small. And they don't want to give it up. But on the same hand, on the other hand, they want to have a healthy relationship. They want to be living in the world instead of, in their head. And I keep hearing this whole week, it's been yes, but, or, well, I understand how that would work for others, but it won't work for me because it's this like, oh my God, it's like, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Yeah.
And I think this is a little bit of what you're saying, particularly, and I want to talk about betrayed partners too, but I think a little bit of what you're saying for addicts is you got to make some changes. You got to commit to something.
And here's why, because that illusion that you can get the right play by sitting on the sidelines, it's just that, it's an illusion. That's not how life works. You can't learn how to play the game of football by watching a lot. You can learn the rules, but that doesn't make you good at it. The cure for, I think ambivalence can also, it can be a form of perfectionism. And perfectionism is really about not being able to face our imperfection. I want it. I don't want to face the pain. The cure for perfectionism is to take imperfect action. So out of the gate, what I'm doing is not the best thing. It's not the most perfect thing, but it's something. And I'll get more and more honed in on that. And I think in addiction recovery, that same thing. Scott, I have a very similar experience to you when somebody says, yeah, but that's not going to work for me. I'll usually say, well, how do you know?
Right.
You've never tried it. Why don't you go and try it? And if you fail spectacularly, great. We never have to talk about it again. We won't go down that road again. You might just find something there that's valuable for you. And that's what you need to do, is you need to go along and collect these valuable little trinkets so that you can craft a life that will actually work for you. Instead of waiting for that to be to you and you say, oh, that's good, I'll sign off on it. Because you'll be just as disengaged from that life as you already are. Because you're not willing to face imperfection, disappointment, heartache, and that's what we're all here for.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned safety. It is a safe place to just never move. The example, I'll try not to be too gross, but the example I use with my guys sometimes is, if you're living in a pile of doo-doo, you can curl up and make a nest there, and it's soft and it's warm. And you get used to the smell, and it's still a pile of crap, but it's your pile of crap, and you kind of, it's safe and comfortable, and and I'm like, yeah, but it's still a pile of crap. You're living in a pile of crap. Why don't you move, take a shower, and get someplace that doesn't smell? But it's safe there. And it's scary to, change is scary. any change is scary because, as you said, change comes with loss.
Yeah.
You have to let something go. And, this is and the dilemma for addicts is I have to let something go that's been with me for a long time. And that I know, and that knows me. And, when I go online and look at porn, I know what I'm getting. If I go into the other room and try talking to my wife, I don't know what I'm getting.
Yeah.
She might be mad at me. She might be disappointed in me. She might just want to be alone. I may not get my needs met. Not that porn meets my needs. Porn distracts me from my needs. And it is the dilemma for addicts. And somewhere, I think it's really step one in the 12 steps is you're like, okay, this is a mess and I need some help. Steps 1, 2, and 3, I have a problem. I need help. I think I'll accept some help. And that's the bridge that addicts have to cross. But betrayed partners, it's kind of a different bridge. I want to be close to you, but you don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And it's this desire, it's this push-pull of I want, a vulnerable, attached, trusting relationship. And I don't have it right now, but I still feel the need for that. And, betrayed partners end up on this emotional roller coaster where, 1 minute I'm reaching out to you and I'm loving and I want to be connected. And the next minute I want to throw your stuff on the lawn and change the locks. And, and there's no trigger really, or identifiable trigger sometimes that moves me from point A to point B. And this is sort of the attachment ambivalence. Should I stay? Should I go? I don't know. And so, can you address kind of the way I just addressed addicts, like if nothing changes, nothing changes. How do we get betrayed partners moving?
Yeah. So it's not that both sides of the ambivalence are not true or not helpful. It's your sticking point in between. So, when you talk about that, I want to be close to you, and then the next day I want to throw your stuff on the lawn. As a betrayed partner, you might want to examine on both sides what makes me feel that way, because it doesn't just come out of nowhere. And you can start to understand that it's not just inside me that this happens. It may be, the day that you come home and you are distant and angry and whining about everything in your life rather than working your program. Well, guess what? The next morning I want to throw all your stuff on the lawn and I want you gone. So even that willingness to examine, why do I feel this way? A lot of times we avoid that because we fear that, well, I'll find that it's invalid for me to feel that way, or I'll find it stupid for me to feel that way. There are very few things that are invalid to feel or stupid to feel. And the more you understand it, the more you can use it. And then you take that data back to your partner. Listen, I just realized that the times I want to be closest to you, there's these qualities going on between us or inside of you. I want you to know that, because if you're interested in being close to me, you can cultivate that. I'm learning more and more that these things are bottom lines for me. They're deal breakers for me. I want to kick you out of the house with that. So notice again how even that little bit of movement into I'm going to see what this is for me, it can help you see clearly what the next steps are. And it's this progressive movement. So then that might move into, I need you to do the following things. And if you do, I can consider trusting you again. All right, the gauntlet's thrown down. Do this, don't do that. And as I sit and watch, I can see either, all right, this is safer for me to approach. Again, there's a path for movement, or you're not really doing it. You're not getting it. So I need to find out if you don't understand, if you don't care, or if you're just going to do whatever you want anyway. And that, again, marks a path for movement. If you don't care and you're going to do what you want anyway, what am I doing here?
So one last question for me. With couples, the pathway out of ambivalence, do people make huge leaps and bounds? Is it slow but steady? Is it 2 steps forward, 1 step backward?
Here's the trick I use to highlight ambivalence for couples. It's called bending metal. And so when I see ambivalence in the room, I know how corrosive it is and I need to get them to stop. So when I see somebody who's, kind of their ambivalence is indicating that they might be headed for the door, I'll say to them, turn to your partner right now and tell them you're done, you're leaving. And, they'll look at me, and some of them will say it and some will say, I can't say that. Whatever comes up, I'll ask them, what was that like for you? And most people will say, well, that felt gross. Why would you have me say that? And I'll say, okay, well, go the other direction. I'm here forever. I'm never leaving. My heart is yours. And sometimes, maybe about 50-50, the person will say that and they'll say, that feels better. Like that's more what I want. And sometimes they'll say, well, that doesn't feel true either. Either way, I'll say, if you don't mean it, don't hint at it. If you're not prepared to do it, don't do it, because movement in or out of a relationship, it's threatening. Movement into the relationship is threatening because you're making promises, you're building hopes. And if you don't really mean it, you're going to let your partner down. So with couples, getting the ambivalence on the table has a lot to do with, say what you're hinting at and see how that actually feels. And if you don't mean it, don't say it. You can say, I'm not sure. I'm confused right now. That's a whole lot better than dropping this trail of breadcrumbs, which is what most people do when they don't fully embrace what they feel.
Yeah, and to that end, I mean, whenever I talk about boundaries, boundaries are usually, John, when you do this, it makes me feel this way. So in the future, when you do this, I will respond by this. And when I'm coaching people on how to set boundaries, make sure the consequence that you're putting in place is about me. I will do this, and I need to make sure I'm willing to do it. John, if you cheat on me again, I'm going to leave. And I'm going to file for divorce. I need to make sure that if he looks at porn one more time, that's it. I really am doing, because otherwise it's icky and I lose credibility. And, so we need to figure out what we mean and then say what we mean. So that was a little off topic, but okay, we should get to the Q&A. What does ambivalence to grief look like for the spouse of a mother enmeshed man?
Yeah, some of the ambivalence that I see with partners of enmeshed men, sometimes the only connection you have to him is taking on that mother role. And that usually doesn't feel good to the partner who has to be the surrogate parent. At the same time, there can be that fear of, well, if I let go of that, then we have nothing. So that's some of the ambivalence that I see in moving things forward. Some of the forestalling grief can be he's got so much potential. Just a little while longer, he's just got to figure a few things out. In the enmeshment workshops I do, I would say 50% or more of the guys who come to workshops are spouses who have found the information and have said, you've got to take a serious look at this, or I can't continue. And that whole well, he's got potential, let me just give him his space, let me just give him a time. And a mesh man is not going to emerge with himself with space and time. He's going to double down on the ambivalence. He needs the pressure, not necessarily from you, but he needs the pressure of what it's costing him to not finish his emancipation. So those are two of the main ways I see that spouses of enmeshed men back up a bit from the grief, back up from making things happen, because it really is. I mean, anything we do to address ambivalence in a relationship, the inherent risk is it puts the relationship on the line. Some things are to a greater degree than others. But when you find yourself pulling back from a relationship, that's usually that's your fear of, I might lose this. You also might live the rest of your days in a relationship that you don't like. That's the risk of staying there.
Yeah, I mean, if I move out of my pile of doo-doo, I might not have someplace else to live.
There's no other warm, soft places around.
Yeah, it feels like it's doo-doo or nowhere sometimes. And it's, that's, is that a choice that can be reality checked and worked through, or?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, what I would say to that, I think of times in my life where I left the nest of doo-doo And there wasn't
I've
any.
never said doo-doo this many times in my life, not even when I was 3.
I was just thinking, like, that's not the word we use with our kids. I think we say crap with my kids.
Yeah.
um but I've left that nest before, and there's been a lot of fear about, like, nothing around me is going to be familiar, and my friends who also have nests in the pile, they're not going to be with me. What's happened every single time, not the only thing that's happened, but the most valuable thing that's happened, is striking out alone. At least initially, I learned a lot about myself. I was able to feel my own feelings and think my own thoughts. Being away from the pile, when I, got scared and started getting closer to it, I could smell it again. I was like, oh, gross. That's where I've been. Life got better. And that's, again, I'm not talking about ambivalence or confronting ambivalence as do I stay or do I go? That's on the extreme end of it. It's, am I going to give myself some movement? You learn more about how you're actually reacting to things if you let yourself have some movement.
Yeah. And, I can only speak as an addict, but I mean, I got really, really nose blind to the mess I was in.
Yeah.
And just blind to the mess I was in. It was part of my denial. And it was, it was painful to break out of that denial and start to see and smell and realize, ooh, I don't really want to be here. And it was, anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
I am a recovering sex addict. 5 weeks ago, my wife had a divorce. The first 3 weeks were difficult, but now I'm in a better place. I'm wondering if I am starting my grieving process without knowing it, or am I trying to survive and protect myself? The loss is real, but shame and guilt are very present, which is painful.
When it comes to grief, remember that the things that we really grieve, they often come with surprise, and that's a monster all of its own. So the disorientation and the sadness that comes from I want a divorce, we're getting divorced. That's a different set of sadness to deal with in the long term, what this is going to be. So where I see a lot of people kid themselves in their grieving process is they think as soon as they start to feel better, that it's all over. What it usually is whatever that phase was that you just went through, it's let up, or you're out of that initial shock phase. So of course you feel better, and I want you to feel better. But be aware that, like, the loss of a marriage or the loss of a relationship, a child, a career, whatever that is, that has echoes throughout your life. And grief is not something I think to be avoided at all costs. It's loss is a normal part of life, therefore grief is. I had a therapist explain it to me once. I was in his office crying, bawling, and I said, Jim, it's just not fair. I've worked through this before. I've dealt with this. And he started laughing, and I got mad. I said, so why are you laughing? He said, I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at your pain. It just strikes me. I remember when I thought it was linear too, that you start here, you do your grieving, and you never have to come back to it again. He said, it's orbital, and you're orbiting this again. He said, your job is not to thrust yourself out of orbit yet, but to look, is this orbit any different than how you orbited it before? Are you seeing anything different? Is there a different altitude, attitude? And that image has been really, really helpful for me when the grief comes up again and the hard feelings come up again. That image has been really, really helpful, that it's just another opportunity to examine this. And often when I'll take that stance, I can see my growth, I can see my change, and I can also, get more in touch with what that meant to me. So if you think that your grief is over, check yourself. If you're enjoying the reprieve from the shock, good. There's going to be more coming. Just, breathe deep and stay with it.
Yeah, it's every emotion, this too shall pass, whether it's a good emotion or a bad emotion, whether it's a good day or a bad day, this too shall pass. We can sit in the good moments and be terrified of when it's going to pass. We can just sit there and wait for the other shoe to drop. Brene Brown uses the term foreboding joy. She talks about after she had her first child, the child was in the crib and sleeping, and she's standing in the doorway watching her little baby sleep. And it's the most joyful moment of her life. And she was terrified that what happens if he falls out of the crib? Or she, I think, stops breathing, or, just waiting for the catastrophe, and couldn't enjoy the joy of the moment. And I think grief spins us into a lot of foreboding joy. Even when we're feeling good, we feel like we should be grieving. We feel like we should be in pain. So we can't enjoy feeling good for a few moments. And, there's denial, there's anger, there's bargaining, there's depression. We always add remorse, because a lot of addicts have remorse about what they've done. And then we get to acceptance, which is where we want to get. But as Jon said, acceptance is this too shall pass. And it will come back with grief, with trauma work. Jon, can you address trauma work a little bit, and the layers, and every time we think we're done, it's like not done?
Yeah. This might be controversial for those of you who have, done your own trauma work or might be providers, but I actually, it bothers me a bit when I'm in training and they talk about clearing trauma, because it makes this promise that I don't think can be fulfilled, that we can make it like it never happened. That is just not how human beings work. And I'm not a glutton for punishment. I don't think if you've been through something crappy, you should suffer for the rest of your life. But when you learn something, when you experience something, it stays with you in some way. And, that's just the nature of trauma. Some of what stays with you is pretty darn unpleasant. So for me, in my own personal trauma work, the goal had to become not moving it out and being away from it, because that set me up to feel like such a pile of doo-doo, because I could never accomplish that. So I changed my goal. I changed my focus to, I want to be more prepared the next time it comes up. Because one of the indicators that someone will develop trauma is they're disoriented. They are taken by surprise. This is not what I was expecting, either this thing or the magnitude of it or the length of it. So my goal is, each time I enter the orbit again, or how I do this orbit as I'm leaving it, I want to set myself up so the next time I enter it, I'm not as taken by surprise. I'm not as disoriented. I can get, oh, yep, this is that mom stuff again, or this is that abandonment stuff again. Because if you look at, I guess the metaphor that I'll use, when you look at like how some drugs affect the body, they store themselves in fatty tissue, and the effects of that drug can be felt years after you've been abstinent, because whatever happens with that fatty tissue, it's activated and it's put back into the bloodstream. So you can see this with babies that are born addicted to drugs. They can have withdrawal symptoms years after, because of how it's stored in. Trauma, I think, is the same way. And your body can process it as long as you let it. It's when we brace and it's that, nope, not going there, not going to feel it. That's when we really prolong the suffering, actually, versus the, okay, yep, I'm in that abandonment stuff again, or I'm in that mistrust stuff again, or I'm in that betrayal stuff again. Yeah, that's not a dismissal. It's a reorientation. Here's what I need to do about it. I need to double check for my safety. I need to talk through my feelings. I need to get good self-care, because this too shall pass.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I still have dreams 20 years after the fact about some of the trauma that pushed me into recovery, thankfully, but still traumatic. I still have dreams about it, but I have to feel it and acknowledge it and do a little work around it and reality check it. It's not happening in the moment. And it loses power every time. Like, now I'll have a dream and I can just wake up and go, that again.
Yeah.
But this is 20 years of, thoughts and dreams and pain, and it loses its power, but it's always going to be there. It's like with betrayal, an intimate betrayal, there is always going to be before the betrayal and discovery and after. Mm-hmm. It's always going to be there. Doesn't mean your relationship can't heal. It doesn't mean your relationship can't be better than it ever was, but there's always a demarcation there in the middle where there was big trauma. So,
yeah.
This one says, this is a great topic. You mentioned, I need to see ... as something a partner can state. Oh, this is a good question. I have a hard time knowing what is realistic to set in terms of boundaries. how do I set what I want and see what I want to see when I don't know how much he should be attending meetings or doing reach out calls or et cetera. So this is a betrayed partner who doesn't know what the cheating partner should be doing, would like to set some boundaries, but doesn't really know how to go about it and what the boundaries should be.
So what you're asking for there is not, it's not because you're an expert in recovery. If your partner growing a second head would make you feel safer, that's not out of bounds. Might be impossible, but it's not about what your partner needs to be doing. It's about what you need to experience to feel safety. So as far as like what's realistic, well, it's not necessarily about what your partner can do, because if you keep setting the bar at what your partner can do now, you'll be disappointed and you won't be taken care of. It's again about what you need to be able to experience from your partner so you consider trusting again. So I go to the example of growing a second head. Well, pull back and ask, why do I think that would make me feel more safe? Well, two brains are better than one. You're not just going through this all by yourself. Okay, so we're getting to like a principle. I need to know that you're not just thinking things through all by yourself. Great, there's 1,000 other options for that. That could look like reading, that could look going to therapy, that could look like having a sponsor. It's all related to the principle of I need to know that you're not trying to figure this out all by yourself, because the last time you did that, it was a disaster. As far as meetings go, why do you want your partner to go to meetings and do reach out calls? Again, it could be, well, you didn't come up with recovery on your own. You haven't. You need to learn that from somebody. I need to see you learn recovery. And in the beginning, what you're asking your partner to do may be because they don't know how to do it under their own power yet. So when a colleague that I work with who works with a lot of the partners of the addicts that I work with and in the couples, she does a fantastic job when a partner wants something from their addicted spouse, helping them understand why they want that thing. And very rarely in our work together has she discovered something that, oh, they just want this because they're crazy. No, it's usually related to something really tangible and meaningful. And once we get to that, the request becomes even more powerful. It could even be the bottom line. I can't consider trusting you if I don't know you're taking this seriously. And right now, the best thing I can think of is that you go to meetings twice a week and you do a reach out call once a day. Because I know you don't like that. I know that's a stretch for you, and that's actually what I need. I need to see you stretching to make your life and our relationship work. Don't take that what you're wanting is unreasonable if your partner's response is like, that's crazy, that's unreasonable, because it's not about them. It's about you. You could say wear blue every day to remind yourself not to relapse. That would make me feel safer, because it's not about what they need to do. It's about what you need to see to consider trusting again. The famous example, the band Van Halen, they were famous for having ridiculous contracts with concert venues. They would have things like, we want M&Ms in the dressing room, but no green M&Ms in the bowl. And they would bury it. It's called the rider. They would bury it in this part of the contract. So, because their shows were known for being big and elaborate, and it could be dangerous if it wasn't set up right. They knew instantly when they walked into the dressing room and they checked the bowl, if there were no green M&Ms in it, they knew that detail was paid attention to, and they could go on with the show. There were times where they canceled the show and they got this reputation for being prima donnas. It wasn't about the M&Ms. It was about the, are you paying attention to detail? And it's the same thing with what you're asking for your partner. You don't have to make it ridiculous. You don't have to, don't only wear green, but know what it is you're looking for. I need to know you're paying attention to detail. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and going back to ambivalence, the more ambivalent I am as an addict, the more resistant I'm going to be to everything.
Yep.
And you as the betrayed partner, what you need to see is some forward movement, some effort at making change. And I mean, so John, my question is, should you start small and then try to work for, what I'd really like to see is a meeting every day at this, or should you just state like, here's what I really need to see is a meeting every day at therapy and group
It,
therapy and at work
it
group.
depends on whose needs you're looking at. And I tell the addicted guys that I work with, unfortunately, the way you chose to protest this relationship left you without a leg to stand on, and you have to accept that. You've delegitimized yourself. So whatever complaints you have, they have to wait now, because you really broke the frame here. So I would say that the danger in starting small is it's like the inverse of a trickle disclosure. You're actually going to be seen as a nag if I'm constantly raising the bar, moving the goalpost, versus from the very beginning, I'm clear with what I want. And a little bit of pressure, or I should say a lot of pressure on an ambivalent person, is not a bad thing. I have a very dear friend right now in a rough patch in their marriage, and their spouse has been really, really resistant. And one of the things that she said to him a while ago is, we've kind of done this cycle before, and I've always, been glad when you came back, and I've always been open, and loving. And she said, I don't know if I will be this time. You may take your time, but I may not want to be close to you when you come back around because of what you're putting me through right now. And for those of you that are on the addict side of this, that are resistant to that kind of pushing, that's what you're playing with when you play with ambivalence. Your partner has a clock. Everybody does. You put someone through enough crap, and they may not spring back next time. It's a gamble. You actually never know. So when the requests are made, when we're having that conversation around what I need to continue, what's the harm in taking that seriously? So you might lose a couple hours a week because you're going to meetings. Is that a fair price to pay to keep your marriage? You may struggle. You may not like it. You may have to learn how to walk in those shoes, so to speak. Are you willing to put your marriage on the line for your comfort?
I'm glad I asked that question, because my tendency would be to start small, try to work up. But of course, that's what I was raised with. And of course, it made me insane. You said this, and now it's this.
And if there's a difference, if you two agree, all right, this is going to be really hard and it'll be demoralizing. I need some wins. All right, well, let's talk about it. But we have the end in mind. Here's the end goal. We can work up to it, but that has to be a collaborative thing. It cannot be I asked you for what I needed and you don't want to do it, so I gave you something that you can accept, which is nothing like what I want. It doesn't take care of both parties.
Yeah. Before we log out, I want to reiterate one of the things you said that really sticks with me is sometimes explaining why I want this and why I need this is important. I want you to go to a meeting. I need you to go to a meeting every day because I know you looked at porn every day. You have the time and you'll do it every day. So, do recovery every day instead. That's the step I need you to take. Explaining it, I think, helps me as an addict be less defensive.
I mean, the bottom line for you addicts out there, most of what your partner asks for, why they're asking for, is I need to know you take me seriously, and that you think about me. Do you want to be in a relationship where you're not taken seriously and your partner never thinks about you? Of course not. So if you want it, give it.
Yeah, here, I was giving it to you and you squandered it away. If you want it back, here's the price.
Yeah.
This is the price of readmission. So hand stamp, not good enough. Thank you, Jon. Thank you, everybody. We will be back in a couple of weeks. Anything you want to say to take us out?
No, just thanks for the time. Thanks for the questions. And I'll be excited to be back in a couple of weeks.
Okay. We'll see you, everybody.
Bye.